Hello everyone, we are beginning to wind down Unit 3. If you'll notice, our standard has changed down there and it is the final standard for Unit 3. When we were discussing the different types of market structures, we talked about monopolies. We are now going to go much more in depth with monopolies. Now, many of you guys already alluded to the fact, and we discussed it in class, that monopolies are illegal, but there are some cases when monopolies are in fact not illegal, aka monopolies are legal. So there are four different types of legal monopolies, and why does the government protect some? And then what are the consumer benefits of a natural monopoly, which we're about to find out about. So what I want to emphasize is that when you just say the word monopoly, monopolies are illegal with a few key exceptions. These four exceptions are as follows: natural monopolies, geographic, technological, and government monopolies. So let's break these down one by one and find out why are these legal when other types of monopolies are illegal. So here's what a natural monopoly is. So here's the deal. Sometimes it is simply more efficient and cheaper to have one company, just one, again that's a monopoly, providing a public good or service. It is most efficient for production to be concentrated in a single firm rather than allowing it to be open for competition, basically. So think about this. When I say natural monopoly, I want you guys to think about public utilities for the most part. If you get electricity in Lakeland, you get it from Lakeland Electric. Lakeland Electric is a monopoly. It's a natural monopoly, therefore it is not illegal. I want you guys to think about how big the actual Lakeland Electric facility is. It's off of Lake Parker. It is huge. It's enormous. It's a multi-million-dollar complex. Can you imagine how ridiculous it would be to have two or three of those competing for business when that one building is perfectly capable of providing power to all of Lakeland? Why would we want to have more than one option? It would be inefficient. In fact, it would be more expensive. Think about all of the power lines that would be run. So all the power lines we have in Lakeland are owned by Lakeland Electric. As ugly, as unsightly, and as unwieldy as power lines are, would you really want two or three times more that number of power lines congesting our roadways? Chances are probably not. So when I say that natural monopolies are cheaper, here's that key phrase I've been talking about a lot: economies of scale. The large scale or size of natural monopolies, again, think about public utilities such as electric companies being the textbook example. The large scale of natural monopolies lead to monopolies having economies of scale. Economies of scale simply means that the more you produce, the cheaper it gets. The bigger you are, the cheaper it gets. If I were to try to start my own electric company, and as ridiculous as an example this is, I would be very small and very inefficient. When in fact, someone who's a lot bigger and more powerful, more power to them, they simply can do it better for me and they can do it cheaper. So economies of scale are low production costs which result from the large size of output. And here are some examples of natural monopolies. Again, when I say natural monopolies, I want you to think public utilities. To our left, we have a water treatment plant. You may not be able to tell from the air, but that's a large chunk of land. That water treatment plant is probably providing clean water for whatever town or city that is. It would be silly to have different companies competing for our business for water treatment plants. Would you really want to have Company X's sewer lines going underneath your house, and then Company Y has to come in and put their sewer lines, and then Company Z has to put their sewer lines? That's not very efficient at all. And of course, we have power plants and power lines owned by those power plants. Moving on, we have something called a geographic monopoly. And that's a monopoly caused by geographic, not market factors. When I say geographic monopoly, the two most common examples are what I have here. Think about a gas station or a grocery store in the middle of nowhere. Now, if there were a grocery store that had a monopoly here in Lakeland, that would be illegal. But how do you feel about it being illegal if you are in a remote Alaskan village and there is one and only one grocery store? Unless you want to starve to death or live off the land, that's the only place you can get groceries from. That is not illegal. That's called a geographic monopoly. Because it is so small, because it is so remote, because it is so difficult to get business there in the first place, those monopolies are not illegal. If any of you ever drive out west, you will be driving for hundreds and hundreds of miles through roads, quite literally in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And you get that one gas station every 30 to 40 miles. Those gas stations are examples of geographic monopolies. They are in the middle of nowhere. Now, we don't need to have 2 or 3 gas stations in the middle of nowhere. That's just inefficient. If one gas station is plenty enough to provide everyone with gas in the middle of nowhere, why would you want to have 2 or 3? Now, a geographic monopoly that's commonly left out, I want you guys to think about concession stands. Think about your favorite sporting or entertainment venue, whether it's at a concert, at a stadium, whatever it is. Now think about this. When you enter that sporting venue, in most cases, you're not allowed to leave. If you want to get food or a drink at that sporting venue, you must get it at those concession stands. If you go to the theater and want to get popcorn, assuming you are a law-abiding citizen and not sneaking food in, you have to get it from that concession stand. If you are at a Tampa Bay Buccaneer game, not sure who'd want to go to one of those games, but assuming you are at a Tampa Bay Buccaneer game, if you want to get food at the stadium, you have to go to the concession stands. That is also an example of a geographic monopoly. That is your location. You only have that one particular option to get your need or want fulfilled. Moving on. Technological monopolies. So before I even read the definition, when I say technological, I don't want you guys to think about gadgets and electronics, okay? Technological monopolies are protected by law. And here's what it basically means. It's legal ownership or controlling of a manufacturing method, process, or other scientific agreement. Here's what you guys need to know about technological monopolies. I'm basically talking about patents and copyrights. Chances are, if you are a good student and paying attention, you learned about patents and copyrights in your history classes. So here's what a patent is, and again, these are examples of technological monopolies. If you invent something, you are eligible for a patent, which basically means that the government is going to allow you to have a monopoly over this product or process or method you have created. And the term varies, but in general, patents last for 14 to 20 years, okay? And the key thing with a patent, you cannot patent ideas. It's like, well, I'm going to patent the idea of a spaceship that'll get us to Jupiter in 2 weeks. You cannot patent that. It has to be something you can actually physically produce here and in the now, okay? That's the government saying, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. We're going to give you a patent which allows you a monopoly over your process or manufactured good or service for 14 to 20 years. So if a patent is something that's a product you physically produce, a copyright is something intangible, something you can't touch. So copyright and patents are, the same idea. The government legally gives you a monopoly. But a copyright is something that isn't necessarily manufactured or produced, such as art, literature, or music, or other creative works such as movies and other forms of entertainment. Now, copyrights vary substantially, but in general, and again, this is in general, it does vary, it's about 70 years. So patents and copyrights are examples of the government allowing inventors, so to speak, a monopoly over their good, service, or ideas. And finally, we have government monopolies, which are very similar to natural monopolies, with the main exception that the monopoly is held by the government itself. So Lakeland Electric is a company, but they are not representative of the Lakeland government. The most common types of government monopolies are roads, bridges, and other types of infrastructure. So in the bottom left-hand corner, we have the Crystal River Nuclear Power Plant. The Crystal River Nuclear Power Plant is the one that is closest to us here. I'd say it's about an hour and a half away from little old Lakeland, Florida. And again, the reason these types of monopolies are allowed to exist, you do not want any random company building a nuclear power plant. Not only is it stupid, expensive, and inefficient, it's also very dangerous. If the government is perfectly capable of providing all of the bridge and roads we need, why would you want to have companies competing for that? Okay, so I told you guys all of that to tell you this, okay? In most cases, monopolies are a dying market structure. It's all about monopolistic competition and oligopolies. Unfortunately, oligopolies. And we'd like to get to perfect competition. That's probably not going to happen. But these four monopolies I just went over, they kind of are a dying breed. They are becoming less and less common. Geographic monopolies, for instance, are becoming less relevant because of internet commerce. Nowadays, if you live in a remote Alaskan village and you need some supplies, you can order on Amazon and they'll have a UPS bus there in 2 or 3 days. Natural monopolies are also being broken apart by technology. For example, back in the day, there was only one cable provider, but now we have so many different options between satellites, dish, various cable networks, fiber optics to get us to watch TV. Technological monopolies are rare. Someone else can come by and invent product Y. Product Y is very similar to product X. It's only slightly different. Think about product differentiation, and they can patent that product. So even though the products are very similar, we each still get our own patent or copyright because the products are not identical. And finally, government monopolies are also dying. These are private companies saying, hey, you know what, government, you suck at maintaining roads. Pay us and let us do it for you. That's an example of a government monopoly dying. Also, in many cities, I live in Orlando, and in many cities, the local government no longer collects garbage. They outsource it to private companies because it is cheaper and more efficient. So I went over these 4 examples of monopolies, of legal monopolies, only to tell you that by and large they are a dying breed. Here's our LEQ review. Here are the 4 different types of monopolies. And I need you guys to know that a natural monopoly is the good thing for a consumer because it is simply more efficient and cheaper. When I say natural monopoly, think about public utilities such as water and electricity. And the reason natural monopolies are cheaper is because of this phenomenon called economies of scale. That means the large size of the business, in general, when you get really large, you get very inefficient and slow. But with natural monopolies, the larger you are, the cheaper you can produce your good or service. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you very much.